This lecture will cover the role and importance of debugging a Phonegap app using the console. The console API is standard and there's no need to install a plugin. However, Cordova does provide a Phonegap plugin specifically for the console. This ensures the Xcode console functions correctly. To resolve this, you can use the Safari console, as it's not worth installing a single plugin for this standard feature. Note that production apps shouldn't have console log messages, as this would insinuate your app isn't production ready. Now let's review our project. We'll start with the index.html file. Here you can see a link that opens a model dialog with the ID of console. The model dialog contains links with IDs. We'll be using the IDs to target each link in JavaScript. You'll also note that we are including the console JavaScript file relating to this dialog. Next, let's review the console.js file. Firstly, before we do anything, it's best to check the Cordova API is ready. So we target the document and attach a Cordova specific event, deviceReady. Next, we define a function we want to call back when Cordova is ready. We also set the useCapture option to false. This Boolean value indicates whether we want the user to initiate the capture. We don't want the user involved in this process, so we set it to false. After the Cordova.js file has finished loading, the deviceReady event is fired. But this doesn't mean the DOM or Zepto has finished loading. To check to make sure the DOM and Zepto has finished loading, I'm using the $sign and brackets. Within the brackets, we have a callback function. This function will be executed when the DOM and Zepto, or jQuery, has finished loading. These precautions must be taken, otherwise you'll inevitably run into problems down the road. We can now safely execute commands against the DOM, including the use of Zepto and Cordova APIs. Now I'm simply targeting each element's ID, attaching an event listener, and finally a callback function for when the event is triggered. You'll notice I'm using touch events, which makes the app far more responsive instead of click events. The main touch events are touch start and touch end. You can think of the parallel mouse events as mouse down and mouse up. Touch start will trigger as soon as the element is touched. However, touch end will only trigger when the user lifts their finger off the element. Ratchet UI is using the touch end event, so I must use the touch end event also on these specific elements to get things working. Let's review what happens in the simulator and view the output in Safari's console. Firstly, I'll open the model dialog. After that, we have the link with the ID of console1. Once the simulated tap event has finished, the touch end event is called. This function calls upon the console and tells it to log a simple string. We will now be able to see that that string appears in the console window. If we execute this link multiple times in a row, an indicator will show how many times this link has been logged into the console. With the next link, I've told it to log two separate items to the console in one command. Firstly a string and secondly a number. There is an Android Quirk which we'll talk about later in this lecture. The next link is logging an object to the console. This is extremely useful as Cordova normally returns an object, so this is very beneficial to our understanding of the Cordova APIs. Objects are more in depth, so sometimes you'll have to expand this information in the console window. Next, we can also log arrays. This array contains a number, string, object, and an embedded array. This shows how complex we can get to really solve major debugging issues. Finally, we have a variable containing the exact same array, and passing that variable to the console log command. This is just another way we can push the content to the console. We can do the exact same thing as we've done here with Safari and iOS as Chrome does with Android. As you can see, clicking these links provides the same output. But what is the elusive Android Quirk? The Android Quirk only appears on real device testing, not the Android emulator. So for example, if I open my console window and serve my app over the network, we can start to see as I tap on the links the output of those console log commands. The second link is supposed to produce a string and a number. However, the Android device only exports one argument and all other arguments are ignored. To resolve this, you could just pass multiple values into an array or object and then print that array or object to the console. For example, I'll click the third link which passes an object to the console log command. My terminal will now print the whole object with all the key and value pairs. The same goes for arrays. Finally, the last link passes the exact same array stored in a variable, and that variable is passed to the console. This is now extremely useful for our testing and debugging.